Hello and welcome. It's been a while since I made a video, and this is obviously late, but such as it is, I wanted to get something out about the Warhammer Fest 2022 reveals. Just my 2 cents on it. I'm a pretty casual person, and because I own a lot of armies, everything is somewhat cool on some level, and I usually avoid a lot of negativity here because it seems, in my mind, more models is always good. And I certainly have had a pretty good experience kind of working through cataloging models, and I've looked at and observed literally thousands of GW models at this point. And so I'm really interested in kind of the history of the model lines and how these types of things get pushed and progressed, if such a word can be used. And so let's kind of dive right in. This will be just my thoughts on what I saw from the reveals. So in general, for 40k, first the new Chaos Space Marine Possessed unit. Now we had Greater Possessed in things like the Shadow Spear box a couple years back, and of course those were moved into the Start Collecting box as well. These are basically the smaller version of them. Again, very similar aesthetic to the Greater Possessed, but I really like what I'm seeing here. Lots of crazy mutants. They're larger. These are on 40 millimeter bases. Historically, the older models were on 32. They came out probably at least 20 years ago. And then, they're pretty interesting in that regard. A little bit of rebasing I'll be doing to convert my existing Possessed up to this level. But I really like what they're going with here. It's really nice to see this Chaos Space Marine line flushed out a little more. But I think for me, the biggest light of this reveal from the 40k side was probably the revealing that you can really have a full-fledged cultist army. All right, there are a couple Chaos Space Marine legions or armies like Alpha Legion and Word Bearers that really are, at least according to the lore, very dependent on infiltration and cultist work. And so I've always loved the idea of Chaos Cultists, probably since like the 5th edition box set of 40k, where we got those cool little cultist units. And these are a nice little jump. Not as seismic a jump from the old Possessed to the new version, but the new cultists are still really good. I think they're quite flavorful. Some of them are not quite as chaosy as others, but they're really good. And then to supplement this, they have these crazy kind of accursed cultist mutants, which are tougher, stronger. They said they're really kind of a horde unit, but I'm not really sure quite how the numbers here work. I suspect there's obviously a smaller box set because they're just larger models. They're probably a box of 5. So I'm not really quite sure how the horde metric really works here. But again, they look really interesting. I'm really kind of looking at maybe doing some word bearer armies that are very much kind of bringing on demons and having lots of kind of cursed units that are half demon, half mortal. And I like what I'm seeing here. There's some really weird models. I would, personally, I think some of these look a little better than others, but as a concept, I think they're really interesting. And then this is further supplemented by the accursed cultist torments. And I think these, again, for the same reason, are just a little very strange, very weird. But again, I'm super excited by the prospect of having this fully fleshed out cultist army. Something that they really have never done, to my knowledge, in 40k. And it's, again, I think some of these models look better than others, but all in all, I think the theme that they're going with is really interesting. And I think that there's a bright future here for some really creative Chaos Space Marine armies. I don't know about the competitive side of this, but just from a collection standpoint, this has me pretty excited. And then, of course, they came out with are coming out with the Dark Commune. And I absolutely love this unit. There are a few. I mean, I'm an enthusiast of basically all models for the most part, but there are some that I definitely view as others. They're better than others. And this is one of those box sets that, like, every single sculpt that I see, I really like. I like everything about this. I don't care what the rules are. I think it's just an absolutely really cool unit, and I will happily add this to my collection. And this is a fully fledged HQ choice for cultists, which is, again, makes them very much the idea of this full cultist army. And then they came out with a little Hernkin Pioneer. It's a cool model. I can't wait to see more of this faction. I suspect that it might be a little slow in terms of its reveal as they, piecemeal units here, there, and everywhere. This is a bike unit. It's a scout and outrider. Kind of explorer, adventure aesthetic. Some echoes of AdMech in terms of which I like. You get the sense that maybe in the primordial past, 10,000 years or so ago, AdMech and these Hernkind had similar types of tech, and then they kind of diverged a bit. They said it's a female model. I'm all for more female models. I don't quite understand how you can differentiate this model from others, but I'll leave it there. But it's really interesting to compare this from the old squat trike, because it is obviously inspired by some of the old squat models, and it's nice to see kind of a new modern spin on these things. There's a new chapter approved mission pack, Warzone Nephilim, new system for command points, supposedly. So basically you get less at the start of the game, more over time. The points, thankfully, will be free. It kind of a separate kind of download, I guess. And basically, they want to lean towards singular style books that are not just trying to catch all different types of play styles. And I think that's an interesting thing for them to be doing, because the reality is that up till now, for the last few years, that's kind of been their aim, to try to include something for everything in every single book. And for someone like myself, it doesn't matter what you're really into. The odds are that you're really interested in everything in one of these books that is basically open narrative and match play, all three at the same time. That's probably a rarity. I think there are people that are really just into match play that probably don't do much narrative or open, and vice versa. There are people that are interested in other things that don't really involve much match play. So I like the fact that they're kind of just offering the rules or points as separate, and this is really just for people that really want what they consider to be more of a competitive edge in the game. Although, from my perspective, these books just tend to complicate things and mess things up. But but there we go. I will probably just get the points on these types of things. So World Eaters will be getting their own dedicated army treatment along the lines of Death Guard and Thousand Sons. Now, this is a huge deal, and one that I, frankly, am very excited for. I can't wait to see all the different new units that might be coming out that are Khorne aesthetic. Basically, I would... they said there's some old favorites in there. Basically, I was thinking those are probably Juggernauts. Characters on Juggernauts are kind of the old staple, and they don't really have much of a play in 40k. There's definitely some Juggernauts in AOS. New Khorne Berserkers will be coming, but there's probably a lot more in the works, right? So when you think of comparable lines in Death Guard and Thousand Sons, each of those is several different types of units. It can't just be Khorne Berserkers. There's going to be lots of other new things added into the works. Larger, more demon infantry, or other crazy cool brass constructs. Who knows? But I'm really looking forward to this. In the interim, there will be some rules in White Dwarf to launch alongside Chaos Space Marines. And then, of course, they have their Demon Prince model. Now, the AOS model here was leaked a few days before the reveal. And then they promoted the AOS version of this. Of course, I think you can just use that model in 40k, but they were really kind of a little sly about it, because they didn't obviously leak all the details that this was a true universal kit that could be used in both games. It's a 60mm base. It's basically a resculpt, the 40k version of it anyway. on the old 3rd edition Demon Prince, which I've always loved that aesthetic. I thought it was a pretty decent model for its time. No doubt this will be a super popular kit because just visually there's a ton of options. There's wings, even, both versions have their foot up on a rock, but if you actually look at it, the rocks are different, the limbs are different. So there's going to be some crazy options in here. And probably the thing that I'm most excited for is the fact that there are 4 different Chaos heads. That's really cool. So, you're going to see this in Chaos Space Marines, probably Death Guard, World Eaters, Slaves of Darkness, potentially Thousand Suns, Disciples of Tzeentch, Megakin, Hedonites. It will be everywhere. This will be a very popular kit. And then they, basically talked a little bit about Angels of Death Origins, kind of a prequel to the Angels of Death animation series that they kind of started Warhammer Plus with. This seemingly does have some improved animation, and probably the best news that we've kind of gotten is that the length of episodes will be increasing. So basically, obviously I'm not privy to the details of the story, but it's clearly about kind of the captain of the ship and the crew. But they're also working on season 2. That seems to be coming out. I wasn't actually expecting Angels of Death to really be a long-term series. I had some concerns about some of its quality. I think as a story, it's actually interesting. I don't have a problem with that. As the first animation that they kind of rolled out, it was a little sketchy. But again, if they're going to continue to improve it and to push the characters and push the story a bit, and the quality a bit, I think it would be good. I don't have a problem with Warhammer TV at all, actually. I think it's a half-decent service for what you pay. But if they want it to be a massive success, then they've really got to work on producing more content, preferably more animation in my case, or visual stories, or produce kind of more diversified content. AOS is obviously pretty lacking at Warhammer Plus insofar as it doesn't exist at this point. Although later this month, supposedly the first Hammer and Bolter AOS story comes out. But most importantly, they've got to have more shows and longer episodes that are not 10, 15 minutes, that are actually sizable, right? But again, I kind of repeat, I paid $60 for this service. I'm getting basically a $40 model for it that I probably would have bought anyway, at roughly $35, $40 easily. And so from my perspective, I'm paying essentially $20 for the remaining services. I don't watch many of the shows. I do watch Hammer and Bolter. I do watch the animated series. And yeah, it's probably about an hour a month. But then I'm paying about $2 a month when you factor it out over the year. So I support what they're doing insofar as I want the future that they're proposing to be a success. I want them to actually have some really interesting shows and a lot of content. And that's not going to get there if you don't at least pay $60 a year. I don't know. That's just me. AOS. The new Skaven Deathmaster. Now, I kept my reserve for any major Skaven releases. I when I suspected a few months ago, and this seemed to be where the headwinds were going, that the Chaos book this summer would indeed be Skaven, the timeline then, and it seemed to be a consensus among many people I was listening to and watching, that there wasn't going to be a lot of releases for Skaven, and that, they were somehow, maybe disappointed by that, but they kind of accepted that, it's just not going to work out. GW continues to have some major production issues, some major logistics issues, and it just didn't seem like it was going to be on the cards for a big multi-kit release. And I've never deviated from that perspective, so I was pleasantly surprised when Eshin got a warband in Warhammer Underworlds, but I really wasn't expecting multiple kits here. Do I think they need this new Skaven Deathmaster? Probably not. I'll take it. I don't have a problem with it. I think it's a really cool model. They already had like a Skaven assassin in Silver Tower, so which is I think the only might be the only AOS Skaven, well, apart from Warhammer Underworlds. But yeah, it's, I don't know. I was not expecting a singular character. Unfortunately, that's the treatment they got. That seems to be somewhat of a trend at this point, where they put out one new character and alongside the new book, and then move on. I hope, when you look back at the release schedule they had in 2019 before the pandemic, before everything just went off the rails, they were putting out so much product and so many books in that year. And frankly, I think that's the model they want, if not more. If you ask me, I think that they probably want even faster pace than what 2019 was doing. But clearly, the last, now almost 2.5 years has been completely off track. Games Workshop must have, undoubtedly, a ton of stuff that they would love to produce and love to release. They just don't have the bandwidth and distribution and manufacturing capability to actually do it. And so there's going to be a huge backlog. I don't know what year it's going to be. I don't know if it's 2023 or something, but gird yourself for an absolutely massive year of releases, such as we've never seen before. But look, I'm generally reasonably happy with these types of releases. I don't have a problem with Skaven. I'm not someone that really truly believes that the Skaven line is just so horrifically outdated that it just absolutely needs help. Most of Scryer, with the exception of Acolytes, is fine. Most Pestilence is perfectly okay. I mean, the kits are a little dated, but they're reasonably good. It's Molder and Eshin that need the help badly. I suspect those are probably the least popular of the Skaven clans. And I'm willing to wait another couple years for a full relaunch. As much as I would love it to be tomorrow, I'm a little patient. And, as of all these things, I, of course, own a Skaven army, so I'm not completely impartial here. I would love to have more Skaven. So, unfortunately, I think I'm a little more disappointed with the fact that the Skaven Battle Tome has the same reused art cover, same as Fire Slayers. And so that seems to be some sort of unfortunate trend. And why this is the case, I don't know. They just couldn't contract a new artist or get some sort of new art. Like, even if it's one that we've already seen, I'd be fine with that. I just like to have a visual difference between different books, between different editions. I don't want, if I have 8 Skaven books over 20 years, I don't want them all to have the same cover. Like, I just don't think that's a fun trend. It just seems to be relatively low cost for them to, again, if they just use existing art, I'd be fine. So Sylvaneth got 4 new kits. And that seemed, at least to me, just completely unexpected. If there's any line that I would have thought they'd just get the one character in one book, I thought it'd be more leaning towards Sylvaneth. So there you go. Again, I have Sylvaneth army, obviously. I think the Sprite Riders and Lancers and the Revenant Seekers, which are dual kit, they look really interesting. They look good, really cool. They do have that kind of the Warhawk Riders of the past from Wood Elves. They have that same aesthetic, the same type of feel to them. The Gossamet Archers are, again, kind of an interesting unit. On first glance, I thought these were kind of sprites that actually had wings, but they're actually being carried by winged insects. So little details like that, I think are just an interesting thing. For me, though, I'm not really sure why these units exist. Again, if I had my choice of what armies would get the new units and which wouldn't, I wouldn't put Sylvaneth on the top tier here. But they do provide a little bit of speed, supposedly. At least they're described as being pretty offensive units. We'll see. The Lady of Vines, however, I do think is just a beautiful model. It's really cool to see kind of a known hero given form. I thought this was Draika myself, according to the lore, but It's not, obviously. I just thought Lady of Vines was Draika, but obviously I was incorrect there. So some of the features, probably like the cape might be a little too flat. But I like a model that I could probably paint in a couple hours and do a half-decent job. And so I appreciate that. But all in all, I mean, you add this to the existing Sylvaneth line, and I think you have a really interesting army there. There's some really good structure and support and a lot of diversity now. And of course, they get the new battle tome. Now, the Ogred Theridons, sadly, we did know these were coming before. Like the AOS Demon Prince, they probably could have spoiled these before the reveal, but they waited. Again, I'm happy insofar as the Slaves of Darkness reveals or leaks didn't spoil the reveal too much, but again, insofar as I knew this unit was coming, it wasn't a big surprise. Look, I like this unit a lot. Ever since they put out, the first Ogrid, I guess in Silver Tower, but more specifically the one from Warcry, I've really wanted more of these units. I think it's a really cool aesthetic. I didn't hear anyone complain with the Warcry that it was kind of more of a Minotaur, but people seem to be a little concerned now that these are probably filling that role, or that they're too closely aligned with the Minotaur aesthetic from Beasts of Chaos. I don't really share that concern, but first off, I own both armies, so that should just be a given. I view them more in line with the language as being a reimagined Chaos Ogre. Right, I have Chaos Ogres in my Slaves of Darkness or Beasts of Chaos army. Depends which you want, because they crossed over multiple times. But I tend to view them purely as kind of an ogre. Although they do have horns, Chaos Ogres also had horns. I understand. I mean, they are similar to like a Minotaur. I just don't have like the massive concern that somehow Minotaurs will get removed, or they just won't be a part of Beasts of Chaos. And I think that these are just a fantastic unit. Man, I want 6 of these in my army at least, with the different weapon options. I just think they're awesome. I think they're a welcome addition visually, I think, to the Slaves of Darkness line. They need kind of that reintroduction of kind of more monstrous infantry alongside the regular Chaos Warriors, as they used to have when they were kind of a hybrid between beasts and warriors. The cities of Sigmar, the Dawnbringer Crusades. Look, I think this will re-envision all of the cities of Sigmar lineup. As someone that owned all the fantasy armies before the transition to Age of Sigmar, I've lamented right from day one the fact that so many of these factions were left out in the wild that didn't have a place in the new game. Obviously, things like Tombkins and Bretonnians were just chopped off right off the bat, didn't have a play. Much of the High Elf range, much of other ranges, like Wood Elves even, were just cut aside. But they kept some. Now, these were newer kits, right? Newer kits that were unveiled in 2014 often. The year before Age of Sigmar launched, the year or two before. And that made sense from a business perspective. These are still future kits. I mean, these would have been released at the same time Age of Sigmar was already being planned and worked on. And so it made sense to keep them around. But at the same time, thematically, when you looked at the range and when you thought about what free cities and cities of Sigmar meant within Age of Sigmar, the aesthetics never matched, right? No one suspected there'd be tons of pantaloons in Age of Sigmar, and yet that's what we continued to have. And so in my mind, these were always susceptible to just outright being removed. Now, that was not announced in any way, structure, form during the reveal, but The truth is that the existing Cities of Sigmar kits, right from the old Empire Free Guild to the kind of Dark Elves that made it into the cities and the old Dwarves that made it into the cities, these do have a pretty limited shelf life. They will not be here years from now. Now, that's the case with every single model and every single release, but I think it's much more finite for these ones. And the Dawnbringer Crusades is basically going to be, as they said, a reimagined Cities of Sigmar. They are creating humans such as should exist in Age of Sigmar. So I think this is going to be a completely different line, similar aesthetic in some ways, because I envision the Dawnbringer Crusades to be very much kind of religious devotees, much like the old warrior priest aesthetic, probably much as we had anticipated and hoped for the Devoted of Sigmar. When you look at the art and the Crusader art we have from these types of concepts, this is the line they seem to be going with. Even these little icons and hints that they played here are similar, right? There's lots of skulls, lots of comets. That's the perspective I think they're going to be going with. But we'll see. This is a long-running project. They'll be working through it and showing pieces off in the likes of Sisters of Battle. I have really high hopes for this. I think it's going to be interesting. I think we're going to see probably a lot more kind of men and women models. Good, fine. And I think we'll finally get a true Age of Sigmar faction. And I don't know to what extent Warhammer Old World plays any consideration here with the existence of old Warhammer Fantasy kits in AOS. But I think it's time to basically try their best to make these separate lines to some extent. And look, I mean, when Old World comes out, I'll probably be there and jumping on that bandwagon too. But I think a truly unique Age of Sigmar, Cities of Sigmar army is a really cool thing. And then there's a new general handbook. Okay, cool. It's pretty much as expected. We've had a general's handbook for the last few years, every summer. The one thing I'm a little annoyed by, again, is the Season 1 language. I don't want to buy a new book every 6 months. But again, according to my discussion earlier with the 40K version of this, maybe it's not quite for me, as they basically said, because again, here the points will be separate for those that want to play match play, but maybe a little more casually, you can just go for that. And I think I might. I don't know. I if there's one purchase that I resent buying, it's these types of books. I just don't use them effectively enough over the course of a year to just be replaced next year. In some cases, I might have not even played a game, right? And there's not cool art or anything often. These things are largely just text. It isn't. I don't think it's just designed for someone like me in the hobby. But we'll see. They've talked about bonuses for battle line infantry. Horde meta, I guess, would be coming back. Although, they kind of used, I guess, the word troops a little loosely because there's plenty of battle line that are actually large creatures now. That seems to also be a trend. So, how this actually stacks out, I don't know. Some of the new rules in recent months and weeks, improved rally, universal ward saves all over the place, not just in one or two armies. That seems to be the trend, and so I'm envisioning this future where everyone just has tons of models, and they can bring a whole bunch back, and they're all super resilient, and that just seems like the worst negative play experience to me. I'm all for horde armies. I have lots and lots of models, most of which would be more along the lines of standard infantry. So I'm all for big units. I don't have a problem with that. I just think things should be dying and killed and not brought back on so easily. But, we'll see how this plays out. Well, obviously, I don't have the book in hand. I don't know what the actual rules are. There's just a few warning signs for me about what this new season of AOS will actually be. There's some new Black Library models based on the books. Dreki Flint for Caradon Overlords from the Archonauts Oath. Kador Ezekiar from the Halloween. Very, very cool. Very stylistic models. I quite like the kind of one-off unexpected model reveals because you can't predict these things. They're not coming out with an army. They're not coming out in any type of predictable pattern, right? And I like that. I like just, here's a new cool vampire model. Here's a new cool KO model. Great. Awesome. And it helps build upon the world height. Obviously, when AOS launched, many existing heroes were just killed off, literally. And so they need more, and you know, we've had plenty of god-like characters brought back into AOS, but we need basically like the regular kind of narrative, more kind of mortal, clearly someone that, you know, could die and have their fate decided by some horrific means. But so I like these a lot. They're fine. Really cool models. Good. Awesome. We'll go to the box games here. Kill Team Morok, which is the next quarterly expansion. I didn't actually know that, you know, in hindsight, yeah, it is quarterly. That seems pretty aggressive to me, but yes, there's a new Kill Team box every quarter. I like this a lot. Like the Militarum Traitors, the Blooded Kill Team. Some interesting options and flexibility in the kit. I just bought a Chaos Renegade out-of-print army from Forge World just a couple months ago. And the first thing I was thinking of is like, you know what, that Blackstone Fortress box with the Traitor Commissar, that'd be really cool in this army. And so I looked online, and lo and behold, you can't actually buy those anymore. But they are reboxed in this Kill Team. And so that makes me kind of excited. Like, I'm all for that. So I like the Chaos side quite a bit. The Imperial side, the Space Marine side, with the Phobos strike team, that's a little more lackluster. It's based off the Incursors and Infiltrator kit, with basically an extra expansion sprue to provide a few extra options in there. Now, I think they probably could have pushed that a little further. There's only, you know, even someone like me who knows the Space Marine 9 pretty well had to, you know, visually search for what the differences are, and once they're pointed out, they're a little more obvious. But visually, they're pretty minor compared to the Tau box, compared to the Sisters of Battle box, compared to the Chaos Space Marine Legion box, which were almost brand new boxes, seemingly. This is a much more lighter touch. I will say I like the trend of just adding the extra sprue into an existing box set. I think that's pretty ingenious. I could talk about that ad nauseum. There's a lot to discuss there. I think it's really cool. For Middle Earth, you got the Grimbjorn and the Bjornlings. Not much to say of this, other than to say that I think the quality of Middle Earth models seems to be improving, or definitely has improved over the past now 20 years. I feel like they've now, for a long time, they're kind of Perry Brother models, which I think are hand sculpted. I think these are now more digital. They're looking more in that direction, and the quality's better. And so, like, I don't actually collect or have much of a collection of Lord of the Rings models. Not really sure why, but they're fine. They're looking good, and I don't know how long they can keep this line going, but there you go. Necromunda, the Ironhead Squat Prospectors. Now, Necromunda has a couple squat mercenaries you could hire, and now they have this dedicated game. These are actually squats. The new Leagues of Votan don't go by that name, but these still do, which is kind of an interesting thing. These have actually been on Necromunda for the past 10,000 years, so though they are the same, I guess, race as the Leagues of Votan, they're culturally quite different. The one critique I might have is that they are very similar to KO, the Caradron Overlords for Age of Sigmar. right down to even some like the hammer design and some of the weapons. That might be really difficult to ask them to really differentiate these too much. I mean, obviously Stormcast and Space Marines look very similar. And in some cases, I just don't know if it's possible to completely create, an extraordinarily unique aesthetic between the two. And they might not even want that, right? I mean, I think people that play KO might use these models and convert them, or vice versa, and that's a great thing to do, to cross-pollinate these lines as well. So, it is what it is. I think they're kind of cool. They seem to have kind of a different role in Necromunda, extremely aggressive, ranged, high-tech. There's a couple games that are like that, but these seem to be kind of in a league of their own. And then, of course, you have the Book of the Outlands. This basically contains everything that was previewed in recent weeks, in the Ash Wastes, and all the vehicles, and even some vehicles from Genestealer Cults, and they're all kind of built together. And then Warcry changed, and this is ironically no longer at the all points or whatever it was before. This is now in the Land of Beasts. Another year, I guess, in the realm of Gur, which I think is a little weird. I would have thought they'd switch them out every year, but we're still here. And so you have the Horns of Hashut. Now, these are followers of the Dark God. Basically, you can see the aesthetic there of horns and crafting, and first things change. The little hoof boots. I love the helmets with like the crazy horns and kind of the bovine aesthetic to them. I think they're really interesting. Some of the like visor plates and things like that are similar to the Mirradish Painbringers, which is kind of an interesting crossover. Some people have pointed out there's no Chaos Dwarden. I can understand why that might be a bit of a disappointment, but I think they're really cool. That's a really cool little warband regardless. The Centurion Marshal, though, I think is at least somewhat similar to Bull Centaur renders, although it has 2 extra limbs. So they're going a little weird there. But I absolutely love that model. I mean, that model is fantastic. I think somehow the armor's getting connected is a little sketchy, but the concept of the model is a really interesting thing to bring into AOS, and I think it looks cool. And then the big Horus Heresy reveal. So most of the Horus Heresy line is resin and supported through Forge World. Although there has been, since the Burning of Prospero and Battle of Calth, a few kits supported through Games Workshop that are plastic, right? So you can get some plastic Praetors and Cataphracti Terminators and some Old Contemptors and some Marines, but most of the options and unique Legion kits, they're all through Forge World. That seems to be changing, and that's a huge deal. Basically, you have this new box set, 40 Tactical Marines that are all Mark 6, 10 Cataphracti Terminators, which are already available, 2 Praetors, which were revealed already, a new Contemptor Dreadnought. I don't know how many of these things actually exist out there. There's so many variants and versions. But okay, we have another one with more options, and it's highly posable. Good. I mean, I will say the older kits are very static. And a new Spartan Assault Tank. The Spartan Assault Tank, by the way, is virtually identical to the Forge World version, but this is plastic, so that's good. And it comes with rulebook and accessories. This is not a limited release. I thought that was interesting. This will be available for some time. If it sells out, they will make more. It will be released in June. Less than 300 USD. I don't know, 285s probably or something. And less than 200 Great Britain pounds. There's a new book for the Liber Astartes and Liber Hereticus. These are basically 300-page volumes that can contain everything you need. They're kind of like the index books that were released a few years ago between editions. And then other books will be forthcoming for other Imperial factions involved in the conflict. No, they don't seem to be referring to Xenos here. It's more like Knights and the Imperial Guard for 30k. Basically, these are new Mark 6 tactical squads. There's also repackaged Mark 3 and Mark 4 tactical squads. All these have 20 models, so they're pretty hefty. I would suspect a price point equivalent for that reason. They're also coming out with boxes of special weapons and 3 different boxes of heavy weapons. The Horus Heresy units are a little unique. In 40k, you can have like I'm completely blanking on the names, but like a Havoc squad in Chaos Space Marine, or a Devastator squad in the Marines, right, where you would have multiple heavy weapons, but generally speaking, the tactical squads just have one special and a variety of bolters. In Horus Heresy, you can equip the entire unit with all heavy weapons, all special weapons, and there's I guess 8 or so different heavy weapons and a half dozen special weapons. So you can get a wide variety, and basically you buy one of these boxes, you can set up one 10-man squad with as many plasma guns as you want. Really cool, interesting, different way of doing it. Again, these were all resin kits produced through Forge World initially. Now they're plastic kits, which is good. There's a Demos pattern Rhino. Man, I have cataloged so many Demos pattern doors and upgrades that this is the most uninteresting release ever for me, but it's a plastic kit. It probably is needed for most Legion armies. But I think the most exciting news there is that many more existing resin kits will eventually get the plastic treatment. So like Mastodons and stuff probably at some point. And I will be pretty excited to get my hands on some of those, because I don't mind resin kits that much. Some of them are perfectly fine. The more recent Forge World kits have been pretty good. But there's a difference between just putting together something that's like 5 or 6 pieces and something that's like 30, 40, 50 pieces. Plastic glue is really helpful to create that bond, that lasting bond. And so, yes, I will. I'm pretty excited to see the plastic. So the old Airman and Greiger Fellhand model from Fall Prospero box, they are being re-released. Good. Why has this not happened in recent years? Like that, it didn't even cross my mind that these were like not actually separated from this box set from 6 years ago. Bonkers. Anyway, it's now those are both now coming out. Good, awesome. The Kratos heavy assault tank, supposedly bigger than a Sicarian, but not as large as a super heavy. I like this one a lot. I think it's a really cool looking tank. And again, plastic, so good. Good. The new Horus Heresy novels from Black Library. There's a couple anthologies, a new book in the Primarch series. All right, fine. I think here the biggest thing for me is just the fact that Horus Heresy will be fully supported by Games Workshop. That's a huge thing. When you think about most modern games, most specialist games, whether it's Adeptus Titanicus or Aeronautica, most of those, or other box games like a Necromunda, most of those lines are supported by Games Workshop now, right? They put out the vast majority of plastic kits, and then Forge World puts out 1 or 2 unique special characters, maybe a couple little. Basically, Games Workshop holds the line and supports it. Forge World puts out the little extra flavorful things. Now, for Horus Heresy, that's been traditionally reversed, right? Where Forge World predominantly does the vast majority of Horus Heresy, Games Workshop puts out a few little supportive kits. That's reversed now. And it's back in line with the other products. So the vast majority will be seen with Horus Heresy. There's going to be a lot of Horus Heresy coming out, a lot of plastic kits in the coming weeks, months, and years. Prepare to be inundated with this. It's been a dry little... I know people complained quite a bit, apparently, that Horus Heresy wasn't getting a lot of attention, and it hasn't been in the past few years. That is now ending. They're going to get a ton of stuff. And Forge World will probably be playing that little more ancillary, off-supported role. So I'm actually really excited for this. Look, it is difficult to collect these things because, from my perspective, it's like, if you have a Word Bearer army, for example, or a Dark Angels army, you can combine both collections cohesively, but not perfectly, right? You can definitely have some 30k armies, and I think you can use some if you wanted to, just casually in 40k, but often the paint schemes are even different. So they are almost quite cohesively different collections. Anyway, I'm making a video shortly about how many armies are actually in Warhammer. I consider that a much more in-depth and complicated discussion than I think most other people. But all in all, I thought this was a crazy week of reveals. Some disappointments, lots of excitement in my mind, and I think the future is pretty bright. I think that they're making the right moves, and I'm excited for these types of new releases to come out. Thanks for listening. Have a good one.